So ID and Bethesda has finally released the third and long-awaited installment in the Doom reboot franchise titled Doom: The Dark Ages. The Doom reboot series has honestly been very consistent, starting off in 2016 with the first installment of just the Doom self-titled Doom game. It was really fun, it was really chaotic, and it spawned a lot of memes which kind of impacted the entire influence the game had, and just in terms of just media culture itself. So many gameplay bits. It was a game that just talked about the entire year, and honestly the remainder of the decade as well. And back in 2020, we also received Doom Eternal, which even emphasized more of the game's impact and solidified it with an awesome score, with the only thing they fear is you being used literally everywhere, like once again in memes, or just in a bunch of videos. You literally cannot escape the song. And the gameplay formula evolved drastically too. I think the beauty of Doom 2016's gameplay was mainly just how simplistic it was. There weren't that many options that you could choose from, and with those options that you had available, you could kind of make these creative combos and just finish off these enemies with glory kills and just kill off these huge waves of enemies with the RPGs or just the automatic rifles, whatever you can have at your disposal. And Doom Eternal kind of upped that thing up by 100,000 notches basically, and just gave us so many different things, much more complex skill trees, or your own little ship, which is kind of like your hub, which you can do a lot of things there too, and I think even play the original Doom game, and also an actual more consistent narrative, which kind of explains Doomslayer's motivation, and it also just makes him more of an interesting character than in the first game. Also, just kind of giving him his own independence, and making him almost like his own boss, and making the entire game's plot revolved around him fighting for himself, not for other people. And also, Doom Eternal's gameplay was just very, just quick and snappy. Like the first game, different things that you had. I think there's a grappling hook in the game, if I'm not mistaken. There's a bunch of just combinations and weird stuff that you could do to just kind of satisfy your own needs or your own playstyles, which I thought made the game just very creative. So fast forward now, here 2025, 5 years later after Doom Eternal, we finally get the long-awaited prequel, Doom: The Dark Ages. Now, the trailers for this game were a bit ambiguous in terms of the narrative. They kind of showed off mostly the gameplay, which is what we wanted. I mean, the narrative part, it's a cool additional feature, but it's like the gameplay is the meat. It's really what people go and play Doom games for. If you only play Doom games for the story, then you're kind of weird. But anyway, when the trailers dropped, I was just incredibly hyped for this game right off the bat. Aside of me loving the other two Doom games, it kind of seemed that the game would revolve more on a more slower paced combat in terms of you analyzing situations, parrying right on time, and making sure decisions you make are actually effective, not just aimlessly shooting people and just gunning people down, which I thought was a very interesting approach. And now with this game being released, I genuinely like that approach a lot. I liked it much more than I expected. I was a bit skeptical at first because I was like, a slower Doom game kind of ruins a bit of the vibe that the other two games already set. And a lot of people love Doom Eternal because of how quick and snappy it was. But thankfully, this game is still technically quick and snappy in its own way. It's just much more you have to time things correctly. The parrying in this game, I think, is just very simple and easy. All you had to do is just with the shield kind of parry, or just perfectly click the right click, at least for PC, to parry these green orbs which reflect to the enemies, which I think is just very easy and simple. And despite this much obvious approach in terms of parrying compared to other games where parrying is very essential, like let's say Sekiro, or just other games of that caliber, which I know is a bit of a stretch since they're wildly different games, but the point is the parrying mechanic in this game, despite it being very simple, it's fine. I generally don't really care that much about if it's way too simple or not, especially because the shield in this game is just so fun to use, and I think parrying just feels super satisfying. You can do some crazy combos with the shield. It just almost feels like you're Captain America in Avengers Endgame, throwing around that shield, killing enemies. And just the amount of upgrades that you could do is just incredible with this shield. I think I spend most of my upgrade points just flat out on the shield, trying to make it as busted as possible. And I think the end game portion of this game was almost a joke because of how busted that shield was. I want to talk a little bit about the level design about this game. I think what stood out for me playing the Doom reboot series is just how different the level designs were for such a linear game. You spent the first game, I think, entirely in hell, and then the second game, you kind of have like a bit of a variety. You kind of go to hell, you kind of go to Earth, you kind of go to other different planets, and I loved the variety. You know, it just made it feel much more just diverse, and I didn't feel like you're just stuck in the same level or same type of level over and over and over. And the platforming in Doom Eternal, despite it not being the greatest, I kind of found it to be interesting, especially with the combinations that you can do with the grappling hook and the kind of tests that the game has you do to just get you out of certain situations. With Doom: The Dark Ages, I feel that a lot of that thing is kind of lost, especially with the puzzles. I think a lot of the puzzles in this game are just super easy to the point that it just asks you, it makes you like ask like why even have the puzzles if it's not going to be like slightly a bit more challenging. It just kind of feels like it's there for just decor almost. And I feel that many of the levels in this game don't have their own uniqueness as the other games did. I really did love though like the special missions where you can ride a dragon or you can use the mecha, in which it literally feels like a mecha anime, like a Neon Genesis Evangelion or like a Gundam type of episode. I had a lot of fun playing those type of missions, but as you kind of progress through the game, you realize you kind of end up doing the same thing over and over and over. There's barely any sort of level diversity in terms of the one that you're riding the dragon. Like, yeah, it's cool to use the dragon and stuff, but there's not really a fun boss fight using in the dragon levels. Kind of feels the same one note thing over and over, and most of the enemies are basically just reskins of previous enemies from previous missions of riding the dragon, which I find it to be kind of like frustrating because this thing was such a hype mechanic of the game. It should have been much more than what was given. Well, yes, I did have some fun playing these missions, especially since it was a nice detour from the very grindy and like killing these wave of enemies type of levels. I just felt that it could have been more than what was provided. But I do think the mech levels, despite it being pretty short, were just very cool. Yes, there isn't that much complexity built into it, but it's just kind of fun to just bust the living hell out of enemies and just kind of have your own like role-playing segment in your head, almost like an anime episode. And it's also very cool to use like that power-up you could do from dodging and parrying the enemy's attack. I just thought it was insanely cool, especially as you progress later on in the game. There's certain mission types in this game which I felt to be just repetitive as hell. There is this one type of a mission type where you have to kill a certain amount of enemies, so like the bar of like the leader goes down. It's almost like you got to kill this like mini boss, but he's like undefeatable unless you kill the enemies around him, so you could lower the overall morale of the team, and his shield can go down and you can actually go in there and kill the boss itself. Usually they are rewarding. They give you like maybe extra max health or extra max ammo or whatever it is the perk and upgrade it is, but it feels like just so in your face throughout the entire game. It's not like an optional segment. For the most part, it's mainly just like you need to kill this specific type of boss in order to progress further in the game. Now, I know it feels silly because, like, yeah, that's what you kind of get for playing a Doom game. You're gonna kill a bunch of waves of enemies. The whole point is killing enemies and demons and monsters in the most gruesome way possible. But I feel that just that type of level becomes so obnoxious at a certain degree, especially more when you're finishing the game, because there are certain levels that just tend to be like 3 of those enemies that you had to go look for, and it just becomes the same exact thing, same thing you did in the other attempts and times, and there just isn't that much diversity, which kind of sucks a bit. I just felt that it could have used much different level types, or maybe maybe more like variety in terms of the enemies, because you just end up fighting the same enemies over and over and over and over, and some of them are just reskins of previous enemies. In terms of the weapon system applied to this game, I personally found it to be there to be an insane amount of weapon options. I kind of thought this game was going to be a bit more grounded like the first game, maybe have just maybe 3 or 4 weapon types, but this one has much more than that, and there's a lot of customization you can put in your weapon types, which is really cool. You can also switch the type of weapon you want to use per weapon type during the fight, which I thought was very cool. I think in Doom Eternal you kind of had to like pause it or just like look at your loadout before entering the levels, which were kind of a bummer. But in this one you can kind of do it mid-fight, which I thought was a very nice detail. And there's a lot of cool varieties in terms of the weapons. I never really found myself bored with the weapons that I had. even though there were some that were kind of useless in the grand scheme of things, I personally found it to be kind of a cool attribute that was applied to the game, and it kind of makes things a bit more refreshing. I've heard a lot of people complain and moan about the OST just like not being the same as the other games because Mick Gordon didn't make the OST for this game because of his falling out with Bethesda and the way that he wasn't given the money that was promised in his contract. But in terms of Doom the Dark Ages, them going with a different composer, which the composers are a finishing move, I didn't mind the soundtrack that much. I'm not gonna lie, it didn't stand out to me the same way that the other two games did, but it's not to say that the OST is bad or anything. I still think it's like solid. I think it matches the theme of the game, the brutal atmosphere, the whole metal drums and guitars and frightening score. I think it matches perfectly with this game. Again, it doesn't stand out to me personally the same way that the other two games did, but maybe it's more of a grower, you know, maybe like during time it'll grow in me so much to the point that I might reach the same heights. But I still think it's cool, you know. I don't think it's bad or anything like that. I still think the OST, for the most part, is pretty solid. In terms of the narrative of this game, which I'm surprised I didn't mention this thing earlier, I thought the narrative was pretty cool. I mean, in terms of like a main villain, which is the Prince Arak, whatever his name is, I thought he was an okay villain. He wasn't necessarily anything just incredible or something like that. But it's interesting that they tried to make a villain in a Doom game a bit more complex than usual, especially with how the first game's villain didn't really have that much of a great villain in general. It just kind of seems like one person that you just had to hate because of like what happened to you, and that's really it. It's a whole revenge story. But in this one, it feels like much more of a greater thing since there is an active war going around between Earth and Hell. Basically, the Prince Sarek guy wants to invade Earth. He's saying like hell. He's looking for this particular artifact that will make him like into like a god form or something to rule over Earth. And it's like this kind of like defending that artifact type of thing. And there's like multiple parties involved in terms of defending it, and there's trust issues involved because there's this sort of group called the Makers, which have viewed the Doomslayer as like a weapon that are a bit like 50-50 in terms of the people on Earth, the humans, and there's like this constant like strife and arguing between each other in terms of how they're going to use Doomslayer and how they're going to protect the artifact and the valley between it, and just again trust issues involved. I think it tries to be a bit more refined than the other stories, and for the most part I think it's solid. It's nothing to like rave about, but it's a good enough story for a Doom game, because to be fair, most of the story is very short, especially since the game wants to put you into the gameplay situation as quick as possible, which is great because it doesn't want to keep you just, you know, linger. It doesn't want the story to just linger on and make the player bored, which is completely fine with me. But aside of the narrative and aside of the gameplay stuff that I've covered, I definitely want to talk about the optimization of this game. Now, when I was first booting up this game on Steam, it just showed me like a huge disclaimer message, kind of like saying that, hey, here's some troubleshooting tips if anything happens on the way. We're aware that whenever you want to record with OBS or any sort of streaming platform, the game might crash, you might have some issues. It's okay, here's like a whole guide, we're working on updating stuff. I found Bethesda to be very welcoming and very just accepting, like, hey, this game might not run flawlessly. We're trying to look at the issues and mistakes that might happen so we can improve with further updates, which I thought was a very cool thing and very honest and candid. But with that being said, I haven't received a single Doom update yet, and I know the game just came out this week. I'm recording this thing on a Sunday, and I beat this game literally like I think an hour ago or something. And the game technically came out on Monday for people who had early access, but for everybody who had a standard edition came out on Wednesday, I believe. Which, look, I mean, it's been out for a couple of days that I don't think I've seen a single update. I don't know, there's a day one patch, and the optimization of this game is very strange because it tells you to update your drivers. It is recommended. I have NVIDIA drivers. I updated it. They even gave me a free skin, which I thought was very nice. But when I was playing this game in the first half, it was stuttering like crazy in some points. Like, it was insane. And even like finishing this game all the way to the end, there were pop-ups, there was like sections that were just loading in, And there were like moments where the graphics looked like PS1 graphics for like a split second. And I thought it was sometimes distracting, even though I kind of laughed it off most of the time, just because of how weird and janky it looked. But there are moments where I just couldn't like look at it away, because it literally affected the gameplay. It would just stutter like crazy sometimes and make the game almost kind of unresponsive. There are also moments where the audio would kind of cut off, which I thought was kind of annoying, even though it was kind of minimal, but it was there. It was kind of like noticeable. It was weird because sometimes when my monitors would go to rest mode, and I would come back to play the game, like the game's like aspect ratio would just like drastically shift into something else. I had to like restart the PC because it, like, even if I were to reboot the game, it wouldn't work in the aspect ratio given. And I'm literally using like the normal monitors at 1920 times 1080p resolution, like not even a widescreen monitor, just a generic monitor that you would have like in a workplace or something. It's nothing, that crazy or anything like that, which is kind of weird. And I was thinking it might be like an issue with my PC, but then I was like, yeah, it's definitely not, because it was doing this thing consistently. And I read there on Reddit just to see if other people have the same issues, and everybody seems to be having the same issues, at least for the PC port of this game. I think like one last thing I want to touch on in terms of this game, I'd say that the environments are very interesting and cool, since this is a prequel and it's supposed to be like hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, before the other two games of the series. It's very medieval, but at the same time, there's like futuristic technology involved. Like there's this guy called Keen Novak or something, and he has like a, almost like a lightsaber, and he can wield like a mech too. And there's like guns and everything involved, with like a mix of like Halo type guns, and there's like wizards and things. It's very weird and strange, and I really love how messy it is in terms of its logic. Because it's really Doom. It's Doom, bro. Like Doom is about like just dragons and slaying demons and stuff. Like, it's incredible. But yeah, I honestly think that the environments between Earth and Hell were kind of cool. There's visually a lot of difference, even though they're both kind of gloomy and sad in comparison. But there are like sections in this game where I think, when the graphics and when everything loads in properly, it looks very good. It looks like visually very, very well for a Doom game. And Doom Eternal was a very well look. I mean, all the games really had a really unique art style attached to them. But I liked it in this game. There was like a lot of texture and detail put into like building the whole world, and just to show you how like messed up it is now with the demons kind of invading Earth, and just to see the contrast between Earth and Hell, and stuff like that. I don't know. I think the deeper you go into the game, into the levels, the cooler the levels look within itself. Overall, I think Doom the Dark Ages is a really good game, honestly. I mean, I know that I've spent most of the video kind of like talking about the flaws the game has, and the optimization issues, some of the level designs being a bit repetitive, and just some issues along the way. But personally, I feel that this game is very fun. I really had fun just slaying mindlessly hordes of demons and devils and whatever. The mech levels are really cool. The dragon levels, despite being a bit spotty and kind of repetitive at times, I found it to be a nice just change in terms of the pacing of the game. And also the shield that's integrated in the game really provides a whole different Doom experience from the other games, and adds its own unique spin and twist to it. So I'm thinking that this game is kind of like an 8 out of 10 game. I think it's great. It's not perfect, far from it, but hey, it's pretty good, and I had a lot of fun playing it. So what did you guys think about this game? Did you guys love it? Did you guys hate it? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more reviews in the future, subscribe to the notification bell on so you miss an upload from me. And yeah, see you guys next time. Peace out, and play Doom the Dark Ages.